Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the 1001 Movies podcast. This time I'll be talking about Claire Denis' 1999 drama, Beau Travail.
Beni orta yerinden çatlatıyor. Ağzımda sakızı şişirip arsız patlatıyor. Biz böyle mi gördük babamızdan, hele güne rezil olduk. Yeni adet gelmiş eski köye bak, dostlar mahvoldu. Seni gidip de kıran, yılanı deliğinden çıkaran, kaderim püskül.
Before I talk about the film, I'd like to address one or two quick little things. As you may have noticed, quite a bit of time has lapsed since episode 23 on the outlaw Josie Wales. Originally, when I began this podcast, I hoped to release one episode every 7 to 10 days, and having made a number of episodes ahead of time and had them ready for release, this seemed like a viable option. Since then, I found it increasingly difficult to release weekly episodes with things like keeping up with my professional and social lives, so as of now, the releases may become a little more intermittent, but they will never stop. This episode was an extreme example, as not only did I have to wait a while for the DVD to arrive in the mail, but I was also on vacation for several days. But enough of that. Let's talk about Beau Travail. Director Claire Denis was raised in colonial French Africa. Her first film, Chocolat, in 1988, no relation to the 2000 film starring Johnny Depp, was heavily autobiographical, and it won her critical acclaim at the Cannes Film Festival. She then made a number of other films, most of them set in colonial Africa, including Beau Travail. The film began as a project proposed by a French television station in which filmmakers would make a collection of pieces, all with the theme of a, quote, stranger in a strange land. Denis has joked that the only two characters that were an exception to this theme were the journalist and the good doctor sent on a journey to a foreign land. Denis focused on the French Legion, a segment of the French military which recruits both foreign and French soldiers. After 15 years of service, they would be granted a French passport. Often, no questions would be asked of the recruits' backgrounds, and their motives for joining the Legion may have been questionable, but the requisite 15 years of service has been known to be grueling both physically and emotionally, and many drop out. With their service in a number of foreign countries, including many in Africa, Denis found them to be an ideal subject. The French Legion itself, however, was not very keen on Denis' film after reading the script. They thought it emphasized homosexuality within their ranks, and more on this later, and refused to participate in the filming. The local Minister of Culture gave permission to film in Djibouti, but without the Legion's aid, Denis found herself filming military exercises without the backdrops of military buildings and equipment. The plot is thin and simple on paper, and is based on the novella Billy Budd Sailor by Herman Melville. Leader Galou, who is training a handful of 15 or so legionnaires in arid Djibouti, finds himself growing jealous of the young new recruit Saint-Etienne. Where does this jealousy stem from? Is it homosexual in nature? Is it perhaps not a matter of jealousy, but of anger? In any case, we know nothing of the men's pasts, and are never given any insight in Galou's motivations. The tension worsens when Galou's commanding officer, Forestier, approves of Saint-Etienne, seeing promise in the young man. Galou retaliates by sending Saint-Etienne on a trek through the desert. Saint-Etienne never returns, and at the film's conclusion, Galou's career with the Legion is over, and we last see him laying dramatically aloft a well-made bed, gun in hand, and followed by him dancing awkwardly in a disco before the end credits roll. Now, For a 90-minute film, the plot is practically non-existent, but this is an unfair criticism. Like Leia Ventura or Red Psalm, both of which have been covered in earlier episodes of this podcast, the experience of the film lies almost solely in watching the images that flow organically on the screen. There are many, many montages of bare-chested soldiers exercising, swimming, and working in the hot African sun, and this, perhaps, is where one can read some homosexual subtext, although the men never touch each other. And these scenes are juxtaposed with the same men dancing drunkenly in a local disco. It is clear that these are soldiers, but it's not clear what their purpose is in Africa. They dig holes, they stand and watch, they build barracks, and they perform dangerous aerial exercises. There's no war going on, so what's the point? Meanwhile, we see shots of the Djibouti natives selling clothes, working, and generally living life. Is Denis' film anti-military or anti-colonization? I also touched briefly upon Galou's motivations, as the film never makes it clear why he resents Saint-Étienne so much. Saint-Étienne has barely looked twice at Galou, so one does wonder whether this is an older homosexual man's envy toward the beauty and free attitude of a younger man. This theory can at least be partially dispelled, however, when we see that Galou is having a relationship with a local woman. After watching the film carefully, however, one realizes that motivation is not exactly key to enjoying the film. It's merely the story of one man's spiral into madness amidst the rigid lifestyle required by the French Legion. This paranoia is not told with strange camera angles and chords of music like something Hitchcock or Polanski would perceive, but relentless and repetitive imagery that emphasizes the harsh conditions the men are living in. The only dramatic music here is the piece from Billy Bot opera written by Benjamin Britten. Denis happens to bookend her story with pop music, such as The Rhythm of the Night, a popular disco piece during the end of the 90s. Beau Travail, much like Denis' other films, received critical acclaim, winning accolades and nominations at a number of international film festivals and award ceremonies. Denis, who is 69 years old as of this recording, continues to make films and has made a name for herself, especially with her period between Chocolat and Beau Travail as a French filmmaker who uses traditional French techniques such as slow pacing, little dialogue, and visual subtext in modern settings. Now, what did I think of it? When watching films for this podcast, I often struggle with the problem of whether I should really say I enjoy a film after watching it more than once or learning about the history and or subtext behind it. Could I have enjoyed Leia Ventura if I hadn't listened to Gene Youngblood's excellent commentary? Would Red Psalm have been such a masterpiece if I hadn't learned about socialism? Beau Travail is no exception. I watched the film fresh, with no knowledge of the story or background, and while I enjoyed the imagery, I was frustrated by the lack of the plot. Once I knew a little more about the French Legion and Denis and her history of films about French colonialism in Africa, it sort of began to gel for me, and I enjoyed it with a bit less confusion on the second watch. I still struggle with whether or not that gives me the credentials to do a podcast about this film in the first place, but that's what the point of this podcast partially is, to watch films one wouldn't normally watch, and if I enjoy it and my mission has been successful, to make you seek out the same films. I may never pull this one off of my DVD shelf again, but I enjoyed the experience of watching it, learning about it, and explaining it to someone who likes to listen like you. That's pretty much all I have to say about Beau Travail. Tune in next time when I discuss the 1963 Hollywood war movie The Great Escape, directed by John Sturges. In the meantime, look for the podcast on Facebook, follow me on Twitter via 1001moviespc, and send me feedback at 1001moviespodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, happy viewing.